The Lumiere Restaurant was known as a symbol of sophistication, nestled in the heart of Beverly Hills. Among the bustling, well-dressed crowd that filled the room, a man entered. Ibrahim Traoré, dressed in a simple, worn-out jacket, casual shirt, and scuffed boots, walked into the restaurant like anyone else, unnoticed and humble. There was no flashy display of wealth or status. His presence was understated, almost invisible. Ibrahim moved toward the reception desk with quiet confidence, his calm demeanor standing in a stark contrast to the gleaming opulence around him. Ashley, one of the restaurant's most experienced waitresses, was busy attending to other patrons at the front. She had a reputation for being quick to judge, categorizing every customer based on their appearance. As soon as she spotted Ibrahim, her trained eyes scanned his attire, and a subtle sneer appeared on her face. She couldn't help but let out an internal sigh. Another one of these types, she thought as she observed Ibrahim with a certain disdain. He didn't look anything like the typical Lumiere clientele. He was nothing like the polished, well-groomed guests that usually graced the restaurant's dining room. With a barely concealed eye roll, Ashley finished up her conversation and approached Ibrahim. "Good evening," she said in a tone that was dry and almost forced. "How can I help you?" "I'd like a table, please," Ibrahim replied in a calm and polite voice, his demeanor unfazed by her cold greeting. Ashley raised an eyebrow, her smile disappearing for a split second as she processed his request. There was something about his presence that irritated her even more. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "This is a very exclusive restaurant." Ibrahim didn't flinch. "Yes, I'm sure. This is the place," he responded with a serene confidence that only seemed to frustrate her more. Ashley let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly annoyed, before heading to the reception office. She typed his name into the reservation system with dramatic flair, expecting to find nothing. When nothing came up, she rolled her eyes and walked back out, her attitude even more dismissive. "Well, as I suspected," Ashley began, her tone dripping with sarcasm, "you don't have a reservation. We do have a few tables available, but just so you know, this isn't a casual dining spot." She gestured toward a dimly lit corner of the restaurant. "Follow me. I'll seat you in a suitable area." Ibrahim nodded, still unfazed by her dismissive attitude, and followed her. They walked past the central tables bathed in golden light, and Ashley led him to the farthest corner of the restaurant, near the kitchen. The area was poorly lit and isolated, far removed from the elegance of the rest of the room. "Like, here you go," Ashley said, dropping the menu onto the table with a loud thud, clearly trying to make a point. "This table is perfect for you." Ibrahim glanced at the table and then back at her, his slight smile never leaving his face. "Thank you," he replied calmly. Ashley, still hoping to provoke him, muttered under her breath loud enough for nearby patrons to hear, "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he sees the menu." Ibrahim, however, remained composed, quietly opening the menu and scanning the options without haste. But Ashley remained focused on her assumptions. She wasn't just ignoring him. She was actively trying to make him feel out of place. As the night went on, the tension between Ashley and Ibrahim grew thicker, unnoticed by most of the other diners who were still absorbed in their meals. Ashley, determined to provoke a reaction, watched Ibrahim from across the room, waiting for him to show any sign of discomfort or dissatisfaction. He had been seated in the corner, isolated from the main dining area, but the elderly man who had been observing the interaction from a nearby table, dressed in a navy suit, his neatly combed white hair almost glowing under the soft lighting, noticed Ashley's behavior and couldn't help but feel a sense of discomfort. He leaned over to his wife, who was sitting beside him, and quietly said, "That's disgraceful. The man is doing nothing wrong, but she's making him feel out of place. This isn't how we treat customers." His wife nodded, her frown deepening. "She's awful. He's being so polite, and yet she keeps trying to humiliate him." Meanwhile, Ashley's frustration was growing. She had expected Ibrahim to ask for a drink, maybe some water, maybe even to leave. But he continued to stay at the table with the same calm, composed demeanor. This only made her more determined to prove that he didn't belong in a place like Lumiere. Her sharp comments to her colleagues, made just loud enough for nearby patrons to overhear, grew bolder. "I bet he'll ask for tap water," she said to a colleague as she walked past Ibrahim's table. "It's always the same with these types. They come here to feel important but end up making fools of themselves." As time passed, Ashley's actions became increasingly cruel. When she finally returned to Ibrahim's table to take his order, she made a show of pulling out her notepad with exaggerated motion, clearly trying to provoke him further. "Have you decided what you'd like to order?" she asked with an exaggerated sigh, her voice dripping with boredom. "Or would you like a recommendation?" Ibrahim calmly glanced at the menu before pointing to one of the most expensive main courses. I'd like to try this one, he said politely. Ashley stifled a laugh, as if holding back a snide comment. Ah, the filet de Rossini, she said in a condescending tone. A classic dish. Just to confirm, sir, you do know this costs $350, right? Ibrahim nodded calmly, his demeanor unchanged. Yes, it sounds wonderful. Ashley's smile twisted into a malicious grin. Of course. Just making sure there are no misunderstandings. We wouldn't want anyone to have unpleasant surprises, she said, making her way back to the kitchen, leaving Ibrahim to enjoy his meal. As Ibrahim continued to dine, Ashley's disdain for him grew. She couldn't understand how he remained so calm, despite her every attempt to provoke him. She had made it clear that he was out of place, from his corner table to the sarcastic comments she had made about the food and the service. But Ibrahim, unfazed by her treatment, remained seated, quietly enjoying his meal. It irritated Ashley to no end that he refused to react to her taunts. Across the room, the elderly man, who had earlier spoken to Ibrahim, couldn't help but watch the interaction. His frown deepened as he saw Ashley's behavior escalating. He glanced at his wife, who shook her head in disapproval. This is too much, the woman whispered. She's humiliating him in front of everyone. And for what? The elderly man nodded. I can't stand to see this. Someone needs to speak up. But instead of speaking up immediately, the elderly man sat back and waited. He had a sense that something significant was about to happen. Meanwhile, Ashley seemed to feel more comfortable in her role as the aggressor. She continued to walk past Ibrahim's table at regular intervals, never stopping to ask if he needed anything, but always looking at him with an air of superiority. I bet he'll ask for tap water, she said loudly enough for a nearby table to hear, her voice dripping with contempt. They always do. Come here, act like they belong, but when it comes time to pay, they run for the door. The words hung in the air, and the nearby patrons exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some of them lowered their eyes, while others glanced at Ibrahim, whose expression was still calm, unshaken. The contrast between Ashley's obvious animosity and Ibrahim's serene demeanor was stark. After some time, Ashley finally brought out Ibrahim's main course, taking longer than necessary, as if to make a point. When she arrived at the table, she dropped the plate with a noticeable thud. Here's your order, she said with a fake sweetness. I hope you enjoy it. Just so you know, if you don't like it, there's always a cheaper option we can offer. Ibrahim, still calm, smiled slightly. It looks excellent. Thank you, he said, his tone steady. Ashley's smile faltered as she noticed that he wasn't reacting as she had hoped. Frustrated, she leaned in, speaking just loud enough for the other diners to hear. Are you sure you'll be able to appreciate this? It's a sophisticated dish. It's not exactly for everyone. I'm sure, Ibrahim replied calmly. Thank you for your concern. Ashley's frustration grew. She couldn't provoke him into anger, couldn't get a rise out of him no matter what she said. She muttered something under her breath to a colleague as she walked away. He's pretending to be polite, but it's obvious he's uncomfortable. He won't last the night. The elderly man, watching this whole exchange, shook his head, murmuring to his wife, This is disgraceful. A man like him trying to enjoy a meal, and she treats him this way. It's awful. Meanwhile, Ibrahim remained focused on his meal, unaffected by the tension in the room. He noticed the sympathetic glances from other diners, but his calmness seemed to have a quiet power, almost as if he were untouched by Ashley's attempts to make him feel small. From across the room, a couple who had been watching the scene whispered to each other. He must be someone important, the woman said, her voice full of admiration. Anyone else would have left by now. But look at him, sitting there so calmly. He's stronger than she realizes, her partner nodded. Or maybe he just has a presence that's impossible to ignore. The longer the night wore on, the more Ashley's attempts to provoke Ibrahim grew. Each time she tried to goad him into a reaction, he remained unflinching. But when the coffee arrived, Ashley's last chance to create discomfort came. As she placed it on the table, she made sure to speak loud enough for several nearby tables to hear. You know, Ashley said with a malicious smile, it's hard to maintain standards when just anyone thinks they can walk in here. She threw a pointed glance toward Ibrahim's direction. That's why we have a reservations policy. It helps us avoid situations like this. The nearby patrons, already uncomfortable with Ashley's behavior, started paying closer attention. The couple who had been observing earlier exchanged looks of disbelief, and the elderly man who had spoken with Ibrahim shook his head. She's trying to humiliate him in front of everyone, he muttered to his wife, clearly outraged. But Ibrahim remained calm, sipping his coffee with the same steady composure. He was not moved by the whispers around him, nor by the cruel comments being directed his way. His unshakable calmness had become a quiet testament to something much stronger than any insult Ashley could throw his way. Ashley, feeling emboldened by the attention she was getting, approached Ibrahim's table one last time. "I hope you're enjoying your experience," she said, the sarcasm dripping from her voice. "After all, it's always interesting to have different kinds of people here. It adds a unique touch to the atmosphere." Ibrahim's expression shifted slightly. He fixed her with a steady gaze. "Different? Could you explain what you mean by that?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made Ashley hesitate. Ashley let out a short, nervous laugh, clearly caught off guard by his response. "Oh, don't take it the wrong way. It's just that, well, our clientele typically has a more traditional profile." She glanced at him with a pointed look. "It's rare to see someone with your style here." The room fell silent. Other diners stopped talking and turned their attention toward the exchange, clearly curious about what would happen next. Ashley, pleased with the attention she was receiving, smiled smugly, convinced she had the situation under control. But Ibrahim's calm presence only grew more compelling, and the murmurs from the other patrons made her realize she might have miscalculated. Finally, Ibrahim spoke, his voice steady and deliberate. "You're right. Perhaps I should handle this differently." Before Ashley could respond, the restaurant manager appeared, his face suddenly filled with recognition. As soon as he saw Ibrahim, his expression changed dramatically. He hurried over to the table, completely ignoring Ashley. "Mr. Traore," the manager exclaimed, his voice full of respect. "I wasn't aware you were visiting us today. Please let me know how I can assist you." Ashley's face drained of color as she stood frozen. The blood drained from her face as she realized the person she had been so dismissive of was not just any customer. He was one of the restaurant's owners. Ashley stood frozen, her mind racing as she tried to process what was happening. The manager, who had once seemed so distant, was now bowing his head slightly, addressing Ibrahim with the utmost respect. "Mr. Traore," he repeated, his voice full of warmth, "I sincerely apologize for not recognizing you earlier. It is an honor to have you dining with us this evening. Please let me know if there is anything I can do to make your experience more enjoyable." The room was thick with tension as Ashley stood there, her arrogance slipping away in an instant. Her eyes darted between the manager and Ibrahim, the realization crashing over her like a wave. The man she had mocked, the one she had thought didn't belong, was one of the owners of the very restaurant she had been working at. She felt as though the floor had opened up beneath her. Ibrahim smiled gently, but his gaze was firm. "Thank you, but there's no need for any special treatment. I just want to have a quiet meal." His voice was calm, almost soothing, yet carried an authority that commanded the room's attention. The manager, visibly shaken, nodded immediately. "Of course, Mr. Traore. I will ensure everything goes smoothly from here on out." As the manager turned toward Ashley, his expression darkened. "Ashley," he said sharply, "please leave this table and stay away from it for the rest of the evening. I will take over from here." Ashley's heart pounded in her chest. She opened her mouth to protest, but the look in the manager's eyes silenced her immediately. With her face flushed with embarrassment, she turned away quickly and retreated to the back of the restaurant, avoiding the gazes of the other patrons who had been watching the entire exchange. The other diners, who had been following the scene with bated breath, began to murmur among themselves. Some whispered words of support for Ibrahim, while others exchanged glances of disbelief at Ashley's behavior. The elderly man who had earlier spoken to Ibrahim nodded to his wife, a slight smile of approval forming on his face. "There's someone who knows how to handle the situation with dignity," he said, his voice low but clear enough for nearby diners to hear. Ibrahim, undisturbed by the commotion, sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. His calm presence seemed to settle the room. The diners who had been previously uncomfortable now looked to him with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Ibrahim had handled the situation with a quiet strength that no one could ignore. After a few moments, the manager returned to Ibrahim's table, his demeanor now respectful and deferential. "Mr. Traore," he began, "I must apologize for the unacceptable treatment you received tonight. I will make sure to address this with the staff, and we will ensure this never happens again." Ibrahim nodded politely but firmly. "Thank you," he said, "but I believe this is an opportunity for us all to learn something important. I would like to speak with the team after the restaurant closes. There are a few things we need to discuss." The manager's face softened, and he nodded in agreement. "Of course, Mr. Traore. We'll gather everyone after service." As the night progressed, Ibrahim finished his meal in peace, his demeanor unchanged. The manager discreetly observed from a distance, knowing that the situation had been handled with a level of grace and understanding that few people possessed. Ibrahim wasn't just a customer. He was a leader who had taken the time to teach a lesson without raising his voice, without making a scene. His actions spoke louder than any words could. Once the dinner service was over, the staff gathered in the back room where the manager stood in front of them. The mood was somber and the room fell silent as Ibrahim entered. He didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. His presence alone was enough to capture everyone's focus. "Ashley," he began, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Tonight, we witnessed a situation that goes beyond poor service. It's about the way we treat others, especially when we think no one is watching." Ashley, her face red with shame, looked down at the floor, avoiding his gaze. The other staff members stood quietly, absorbing Ibrahim's words. They knew this wasn't just about a customer. This was about something much bigger. "I've spent my life learning that the true measure of a person is how they treat others," Ibrahim continued. "It's easy to judge someone based on their appearance, their clothing, or their background. But what truly matters is how we treat everyone we encounter, regardless of who they are or where they come from. Tonight, I saw a lack of empathy and respect, and that is something we must all work to change." The room was quiet, the weight of Ibrahim's words settling in. "Ashley, I know you didn't intend to hurt anyone, but your actions tonight were hurtful nonetheless. I hope you take this lesson to heart, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you." Ashley, her voice quiet but full of remorse, finally spoke. "I understand, Mr. Traore. I never thought about it that way before. I was so focused on the restaurant's image and maintaining standards that I forgot what really matters. I forgot that every person has value, no matter who they are or what they look like. I promise I will change." Ibrahim smiled gently, his expression softening. "The promise isn't to me," he said. "It's to yourself. True change comes from within, and if you're willing to learn, I'll be here to help you along the way." The rest of the team nodded, visibly moved by Ibrahim's words. The manager, too, seemed to reflect on the importance of creating a space where everyone was treated with dignity and respect. "Thank you, Mr. Traore," he said. "Your message is clear. We'll work hard to make Lumiere a place where everyone feels welcome, no matter their background." Ibrahim stood up, nodding with satisfaction. Kindness is about the small choices we make every day. It's not about grand gestures. It's about treating people with respect, especially when it's not easy. Remember that, and we'll create something truly special here. As Ibrahim left the room, he paused by the door, turning back to the staff with a final word of encouragement. "This isn't just about tonight," he said. "It's about every moment we encounter someone new. Every person deserves to feel valued. Let's make sure we remember that.